The takeaway is to wake up. The takeaway is to wake up to your past and look hard at what you'd rather ignore. And the process of remembering allows you a hint of freedom from that past.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Dr. Carig Yorke, and we're going to be talking about his book, Steep, A Black Neurosurgeon's Journey. In the book, Carig talks about his beginnings in the projects of Roxbury, Massachusetts, and his ascent to Harvard Medical School. Eventually, Carig became a neurosurgeon in an era when very few black physicians walked the halls of hospitals. But the book and our interview is less about racism's obvious blows than the subtler burdens success can impose. Carig talks about the cost of living your parents' dreams rather than your own dream, and how one can reconcile brilliance with belonging to a community and getting in touch with the truth of who you really are. The book is really about the pursuit of authenticity, identity, and meaning. Of course, in the book, Carig has some amazing stories, and there's one at the end of the interview that I hope everyone stays to listen to, because it is about a patient with a self-inflicted lobotomy. That's all I'm going to say about it. I was blown away by this story, so stick around to the end. I've never heard a story like it. So let's jump into it. This is Carig Yorke, MD. Carig, it's so great to have you on The Exploding Human, and I'm looking forward to talking to you about your new book, Sleep.
Bob, thanks so much. We begin, I guess, by saying that the book is called Steep.
Steep. It was written Steep.
Steep, yes.
Oh,
it is.
How did I either misread it? I guess I misread it. I thought, why did he call it Sleep? And I'm going to find out. Well, now we're going to find out why you called it Steep. This is the kind of in-depth research I do, Carig. I get the titles of books wrong. The reason you're here.
It's a moment of comedy, man.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, all right. Well, I got that wrong, and now we got it right. Steep.
There you go. Yeah.
So we know what steep means, but what does it mean? Well, let's just tell your story first and how you became a neurosurgeon and coming from Roxbury, which I'm familiar with. It's a black neighborhood in Boston, and known for its great racial divide.
Well, steep actually is an adjective. Everyone knows that. And Steep is the memoir of a black neurosurgeon. It is timely and it's mercifully short. It talks about the price of success and the use of memory, what memory's good for. And the through line of the book is how we relate to our past. Are we aware? Or are we unconscious, or somewhere in between? So that is the elevator speech about the book.
Mm-hmm.
Steep, of course, is an adjective. The story of a steep climb from humble beginnings is very well known. It's all over the bookshelves, and starting from nowhere and ending with a Netflix contract or an Academy Award or high political office. I mean, that's well known, but what was more interesting to me was steep as verb. What happens to a pot of tea? And that journey for me began in midlife. I left the operating room, busy practice, when I was 54. And that was a difficult decision, difficult fork in the road, but it was a good decision. And it allowed me to begin to steep myself and my experience. And the result is this little book.
Well, the thing that intrigued me about when I read your bio was that you talked about basically living the expectation and the desire of your parents to
Mm.
become this very accomplished doctor.
Mm.
And how that maybe didn't fit with what was actually going on inside you, and who I guess you hit a place in your life where you went, well, who am I really, and what do I want to be?
We go back to the history of Boston. My parents were wounded. They were significantly wounded by the racial climate in Boston in the 1930s. I came along in 1948 unexpectedly. They were ready to adopt. And they treated their wounds, they scrutinized me hard, but they treated their wounds by forging me into their weapon. I was their weapon against the world's disregard, the world's contempt. And a lot of fusion was present in our family. I was an only child, a lot of surrogacy. And the process of becoming a weapon involved putting on multiple layers of armor. And that armor was learning, it was academic achievement, it was playing the violin when I was 6 years old and didn't have much interest in doing that. It meant becoming an adult at about age 11 or 12. And it meant living the lives of other people. As I've talked to folks, having written this little book, I'm learning that I'm hardly alone in that. I mean, the world is full of folks who they may not worship their ancestors, but they are unconsciously controlled by them.
I was going to ask you, if you were an only child. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think about, without any siblings to kind of bounce things off of what the parents are doing, you're kind of a captive in a sense. You're being molded constantly and scrutinized constantly and micromanaged.
Yeah. I was raised in a bunker, basically. My days were very prescribed. I'm sure that there are a lot of kids in Singapore and Tokyo, Seoul, Buenos Aires, who are having this kind of upbringing. There was a moment of coming into adulthood, really. The first day of seventh grade, I was enrolled into this elite public high school in Boston, the oldest school in the nation, Boston Latin School, and arrived there. 500 boys were admitted to the seventh grade on the recommendation of the sixth grade teacher. And the headmaster stood up and said, "Welcome. I need to let you know that half of you will be thrown out at the end of this year and sent back to your neighborhood schools. And the decision will rely purely on your grades." And all of us are sitting there in our sport coats and white shirts and neckties. These are not ordinary kids. I mean, a lot of these kids had parents who had escaped from Central and Eastern Europe during the 1930s. A lot of these kids were children of folks who had survived the potato famine. And everybody knew that success at this school was your ticket to a steep trajectory for your life. So that was the most competitive year in my life, for sure. It was the beginning of my adulthood. I mean, every day I rode the streetcar with my leaden briefcase and my necktie. Adolescence was not for me. The American teenage experience just did not happen.
I just actually felt in my chest how you must have felt riding that ride to school every day, like thinking, as I'm projecting how I would have felt.
But, the crazy thing, Bob, is that humans normalize pretty much anything. I mean, it was just my life. It was what I did. practice the violin all afternoon, study all night, get up and do the same thing the next day. I mean, I did that for 6 years.
Yeah.
The result was that I was close to bulletproof. I mean, my parents were really disappointed that I didn't have a 1600 on the SAT. I mean,
that's the perfect score, right?
Yeah, right. I think I had 1580. You name it. National Merit Scholar, Presidential Scholar, soloist with the Boston Pops. I mean, the idea was to be difficult to despise. That was normal. That was what I did.
Yeah, yeah. And undeniable, basically, that there was no way to, there's no way to ding this guy because he's doing everything at the top level. That's a lot of pressure.
Tell me. Yeah, it's true.
Any rebellious part of yourself during that time, or you just shut any of that down? Or was there an outlet?
There really wasn't. My dad, when I said, why am I studying all this Latin and algebra, and why am I doing this? He said, well, let's take a ride. And, we rode through his old neighborhood. And anyone who's ever seen The Wire will know what that neighborhood was like. And we stop at a stoplight, and he says, if you don't get all A's, if you're not better than everybody else in that class, here's your future, Craig. Here it is. So let's get back with the program.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that was, maybe I didn't know enough to rebel. But that was my life. I mean, a fork in the road came later on, and I did have some education when I went to college. I was kind of led away. The Latin root of education is educo, which means lead away. I was led away from that desperate experience in time, but that's part of the story. That's part of the memoir.
Did you aspire to be a doctor, or was there other aspirations that sort of running alongside of that?
Yeah.
Because that's a grueling path.
Yeah. I thought I could be a writer, I mean, here's this book, steep.
Yeah.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere. But as a freshman in college, I got a job with the War on Poverty, the Great Society. And my job was to clean out rat cages in a psychology lab at Mass General Hospital across the river from Cambridge, where I was a freshman at Harvard. And in that job, I came into contact with psychologists and psychiatrists, started learning something about the nervous system, fell in love with the nervous system, and I thought, man, I'm going to become a psychiatrist. These guys address the great human questions. They really dress well. They've got great cars. They have a house on Cape Cod. I thought, man, I want to be this. But as I worked in more laboratories, I came in contact with more people. And a guy across the lab bench from me when I was probably halfway through college was a neurosurgery resident. And he said, these psychiatrists are all talk, Craig. Come make rounds with me. Surgeons aren't trained monkeys. You're told they are, but they're not. So one morning, he literally brought a guy back from the dead. In very dramatic fashion. And in the operating room, I'm trying not to throw up or faint or something, but the guy was at death's door, went into the operating room, came out, woke up in the recovery room, started moving all of his limbs. He was paralyzed before he went to the OR. Started complaining about how thirsty he was and why, and I thought, man, these neurosurgeons have the right stuff. They can raise the dead. Now, did I know what the life of a neurosurgeon was? No. I made the decision in ignorance, and it was a long path, of course. That was how it began.
It's amazing how one event can spin your life in a new direction sometimes.
Yeah, and, it's the sort of career that would appeal to a young man, dramatic, you're the top gun of medicine. You're a brain surgeon, what young man or woman wouldn't be infatuated?
In one sense, too, you're godlike in that idea that you're saving a life. You're actually you're able to do that, and you're able to do it in a way that no one else can do it because it's such a specific kind of training. So that must be, just it's I guess you would consider it the ultimate level of medicine, if you want to look at it in terms of the surgical part anyway.
It is dramatic, but it has a flip side. The flip side is that in a secular age, people come to view folks like neurosurgeons as shamans. They're seen as people who wield this magic technology that can solve any problem. And later in my practice, I would run into people who would literally want to live forever. They wouldn't say that, but underlying idea was that there was always a solution to every problem of aging, of decline, and the neurosurgeon or the cardiac surgeon or whoever was the agent of that, the one who wielded the magic wand. And that that was a burden. That really was hard to rebut.
Yeah, there is sort of an interesting idea of this desire, and I run into it a lot in this podcast because I talk to a lot of longevity type people.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of, I guess it's immortality.
Exactly.
And what's underneath immortality? It's actually a fear of dying.
You're right about that.
And so if you're operating in your life with a fear of dying, a constant underlying fear of dying, you're going to be making decisions based on that fear, which are usually fear-based decision making isn't really the way to go in terms of any kind of sustainable happiness. So it's, you're sort of like, I don't really want to die, but I'm not particularly afraid of it, at least today.
It's an unconscious way to live.
Yeah, it is.
People have asked me what the takeaway of this book is, and I tell a story about our younger son. He was about 16, and he did not share the desperation of my upbringing. He was a doctor's kid, and I didn't like some of the choices he was making. We're getting into it, and he comes up to me. He's a big kid. He's 6'4", walks right up to me, and he says, "Dad, do not," conversational, no yelling. He says, "Do not tell me what to do. Tell me what you did." When I'm asked about the takeaway of the book, I say, well, I'm telling folks what I did.
Yeah.
And it's no sermon. It's no polemic. There aren't a lot of victims or villains in the book. But if you push me, the takeaway is to wake up. The takeaway is to wake up to your past and look hard at what you'd rather ignore. And the process of remembering allows you a hint of freedom from that past.
That sort of distant past or semi-distant past carries a lot of energy with it. And a lot of times there's regret, there's anger, there's confusion about it. It couldn't have been any other way. But you don't sometimes, like personally, I felt like I could have done it differently. I knew better and I didn't do what my instincts were telling me. Well, my instincts, maybe I was too little to have the wherewithal to do the thing that I now as an adult wish I had done. And so there's that level of regret that is kind of a burden. It's an anchor to the personal freedom now. And so when I dwell on the past, and dwell is not a good word for me. When I muse about it, it's different. But it's there's, I don't even call them mistakes, but there's things that we all do in the past that just I guess it's what you had to do to get to the point you're at now.
Well, everything influences everything else. That's what the Hindus say. But here's a good moment for the origin story of the book. I mean, it started as a letter to our adult sons to say who their dad was. You know, stuff that does not come up at Thanksgiving dinners and family reunions. And I wrote something chronological and I thought it was pretty good and stuff. And then I literally looked up as I was walking into the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Black Smithsonian, that museum that looks like a hat on the National Mall. And there are two lines from James Baldwin there. And it said, the great force of history is that it lives within us, controls us unconsciously. So I thought, well, Baldwin is talking to me here. I mean, there's a lot of other people in this line, but he's talking to me. And so I looked harder. And in doing that, I got rid of a few layers of armor. And I woke up a little bit. And, well, the next step actually was standing in front of a black study shelf. Big bookstore, big books, you know, Bulletproof History, 1619 Project, Cast, you know, these great books. I'm standing there thinking, these are great books, but they're mostly diagnostic. They're mostly telling us what was wrong in the past, what was horrific about history. And they're telling us about giant historical forces and larger than life characters. There's no space there for the story of one guy from Boston who fell in love in Haight-Ashbury and came to Topeka and made a life, you know. And I thought, you know, I've got 50,000 words, 55,000 words. I can bring my story into the world, and it's a short book, so we can extend that black study shelf half an inch and make room for the story of an individual. So that's the origin story.
We carry the ancestors with us, for better or worse, for trauma or not trauma. It is there, and it's undeniable that that's part of how we're all formed. And when I think about if you come from historically repressed, marginalized group, then you're going to have a certain way of moving through the world that has been passed along that lives in you.
Except the harder you look at it, the more complex it gets. And the harder you look at it, you get to see the trailhead of a steep road. You know, there's a couple of lines from my favorite poem. This is the use of memory for liberation, not less of love, but the expanding of love beyond desire. And so liberation from the future and the past also. Those lines encouraged me as I looked and looked. And I can tell you that done right, done carefully, done with courage, writing a memoir is the most effective psychotherapy you're going to get.
Never thought about it like that. It makes sense. I mean, it is a shining a light on everything, a harsh light,
Mm-hmm.
or a focused light.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can recommend it, you know.
Yeah, okay.
It's what I did. I mean,
yeah. So you go through all this training and you become a neurosurgeon, and you're doing it for decades.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's I'm assuming it went well, you know, as well as anything job can be, and it's a job, but it's also a passion and a calling and a force.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 54, what happened? What was going on? Obviously, there was things percolating before that, but
on the negative side, the working conditions were deteriorating.
Oh, okay.
Managed care, litigation. The two hospitals in town were at war. It seemed to me, a lot more self-inflicted disease with, you know, the determinants of health. Folks eating too much and drinking too much and just, so there was that. Then there was the fact that I was working 90 hours a week. Every time I went into the ER to see some catastrophe, I was reminded that life is short, and every doctor who's got his eyes open can see that every day. So I thought, I've had an amazing liberal arts education. I'm curious about the world. I'm curious about music and art and history and all that. But I've got this beeper, and, the first page of the book is what happens at 2:00 in the morning, as you get called. So I thought, I made a subversive decision. I said, I've got enough money. Our family has enough money. I mean, our society is built on anxiety that you don't have enough money.
It sure is.
Bernie Madoff didn't have enough money. Donald Trump doesn't have enough money. I mean, I was at the peak of my expertise, my, income just went to zero. And that was a good decision. I learned a lot about myself, learned a little bit about the world, reintroduced myself to the violin, really came to enjoy playing tennis. I'm a fanatical tennis player. That was the process. There was the negative side. I mean, I knew a lot about how to get to this brain tumor or that aneurysm, whatever. But I found that I was knowing more and more about less and less. My memory of Chinese history or abstract expressionism was atrophying, was shrinking. And I didn't like that. And I thought, there's more to life than the operating room.
When you think about doing 90-hour weeks, I mean, you don't have time to do almost anything else.
Yeah.
And so that becomes everything, time-wise. Yeah,
it was difficult to be a father. It was hard to do that.
Well, I had a period of time, a decent period of time that I was doing weeks like that, very, very intense hours and coming home late and leaving early. And I remember thinking like, well, why am I doing this? I mean, I like what I'm doing. I'm good at what I'm doing. But why does this need to take so much time? And I remember I was working this one job and I got fired. I was walking down the street in the middle of the day, sunny day, and I went, this is what somebody who gets out of prison must feel like.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't have any horror stories, but I just, but just the idea of, oh man, I don't have to do what I've been doing. I did go back to it, on the next job, but it wasn't quite the same. It was something that shifted. And, it's like those kinds of jobs that are so hour demanding, they'll just take it all from you.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
And it's not even a boss that's trying to do it. It's just the lifestyle.
Oh, the demands of sick people for me. Anyway, let me change the subject.
Great.
People ask me about where this crazy cover came from.
Yeah. You want to describe the cover? Because I don't use the video. What's the,
sure.
Just briefly describe.
It is a pen and ink drawing of a brain cell that was done in about 1895 by a guy named Ramon Cajal. And his drawings, his art, his imagination launched what we call neuroscience. And it launched in one day in 1902. He was a marginalized guy and somehow got invited to talk to the Royal Society in London. And he said to those people, all you guys are wrong about the brain. It's not an infinite network. It's composed of many, many, many individual cells. And those cells communicate with each other electrically, and they change their form with learning. The usual end to that story is that the people who are important in science laugh the newcomer out of the room and he dies in obscurity. But what happened that day was that he electrified the room. He founded neuroscience that day. 2 years later, he became the only anatomist ever to win the Nobel Prize in medicine. And he was proven right in every respect over the next 50 or 60 years. His drawings are beautiful. and they set a really, really high bar for the text. If you judge the book by its cover, please be gentle with this book because the cover is just something else.
One of the interesting things you just said was, or I guess what he said, is that learning changes the physicality even of the cells.
Yeah, there's an anatomical substrate to learning. I mean, if you look at the synapses of an organism that is new, a baby rat, and then you train rats to do X, Y, or Z, the synaptic structure of those neurons, the junction between cells changes. It's as though there's more insulation in certain pathways than others. And it's easier to communicate for a cat, how to see a mouse once they've learned how to do that. It happens much more quickly, much more efficiently as the organism learns and ages.
I guess that's the whole sort of underpinning of neuroplasticity is what they always talk about that.
That's right.
Which was not something that was talked about very much. It's it's really sort of in the zeitgeist now.
That's true. And as with anything else, there's an anatomical substrate to it. The function relies on the form. There's got to be a form that supports the function that you're seeing.
Yeah, I think about it like in terms of even like the internet. It's going through. How is that traveling? Mm-hmm. There actually are wires that go all through under the ocean and all these different places. If you look at a map of internet cables around the world, it's like spaghetti.
You're telling me. You haven't asked me how a bi-coastal driven academic kid got to Kansas.
The reason I didn't ask is because I didn't think to ask it. I assumed you got it's, I guess when you apply for jobs, you get them or you don't.
Yeah. I mean, one fork in the road was leaving Boston at the end of Harvard Medical School, going to this intense, high prestige neurosurgical residency. UC San Francisco was on a short list of the best training programs in the world at that point. Still is, probably. Anyway, you finish that residency. You're the chief resident. And part of your job is to take the calls from the East Bay, from Marin, from the whole surrounding area, referring patients into the university hospital. And what I learned was that in those days, the Bay Area had more neurosurgeons than the United Kingdom did. And those guys were nice guys. They were great, but they had come up with an expectation that they would drive a Porsche, that they would have a place in Tahoe. They succumbed to an ethical temptation to do more spine surgery than they should. And I got the results of that, every day. Because it was such a high-powered academic program, I'm interviewing for assistant professor jobs at UCLA, Emory, Pittsburgh, and I happened to run into a guy at a neurosurgical meeting who was from Topeka, Kansas. And he had done the training at Stanford and so forth. And we're playing tennis, and my feet are melting. I mean, I'm fat at the time, and he's merciful to me. But he said, you can take that job in LA. But if you go there, you'll be superfluous for several years. You'll be at the bottom of yet another hierarchy. You come to Topeka, you'll be necessary on day one because I'm by myself. I'm taking call every night, every weekend, covering over 400,000 people. Anyway, I had just gotten married. My new wife, I said, hey, we're looking out over the Bay Bridge. It's a beautiful morning. I said, what about a job in Topeka? And there was a moment of long silence. And she researched it, and she came back and said, hey, did you know that the Klan is probably active about 30 miles east of Topeka? Anyway, we went through a bunch of stuff and decided we would give Topeka 6 months. It became clear that you could grow up in a place like Topeka in a way it was more difficult in a big metropolis, that there was less friction in your life, that you could devote a little more attention to your kids, that you could be a member of a community I mean, granted, it's 140,000 people, but, it is a community in surprising ways. And a lot of other towns of that size are. So it was a big fork in the road, obviously, to leave San Francisco for Topeka. But it was a good decision.
And it also sort of speaks to, why am I becoming a doctor in the first place? Is it for those, status things, or is it for actually helping people?
Yeah.
And I guess it can be both to an extent, but there's a big distraction in the pursuit of those other things.
Being necessary is pretty powerful stuff. And being able to put your training to use. I mean, my training was unbelievable. And to be able to use it every day was pretty heady stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you ever run into people that, and this is going on now with this whole anti-DEI bullshit, but where they went, I'm not letting this guy operate on me because he's black? Did that ever happen?
Well, the first page of the book will tell that story. But an interesting fact about Topeka and its hospitals, we were known, Mary and I, when we came to Topeka, as the new neurosurgeon. My senior partner told me years later that he would have left if I didn't come, because working every night was not possible. I'm sure that there was some hesitation by some people racially, but we were a monopoly in Northeast Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to go see someone else, it was a little over an hour to Kansas City, and much further to Wichita, Tulsa, or Omaha. And that was the demography. Secondly, the medical community saw me as very valuable, because if you have a hospital that doesn't have a neurosurgeon, you can't do trauma and you can't do spine. And those are big money makers. So
comes down to that too. Yeah.
So the health, the financial health of those two community hospitals was benefited greatly by Mary and me. And so the administrators were delighted. Mm-hmm. The other physicians saw the value. So yeah, there was some racism, no question. It was overcome, I guess, by the demography and by the economics. In time, we became embedded in the community. Here's, if you have time, one more story. This book came into the world in April last year. And in June or July, we launched it at the Topeka Public Library. Great resource for the community. They reserve a room for 150 people. 350 people show up, and more are just turned away. The head of the library is on the phone to the fire marshal, and I was just stunned by how embedded I had become in the community. I mean, thousands of operations, thousands of bedsides, thousands of family waiting rooms, thousands of ICU visits. I mean, orderlies, nursing assistants, patients, nurses, fellow physicians, fellow soccer parents, church members. It was just an amazing demonstration of what happens in a community. I think that's a little more difficult maybe to achieve in a place like LA. But Lord, I mean, community is a real word here.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, because I've lived in smaller places. I'm in LA for a long time now, but I've been in smaller, and that's the thing I miss about those cities, smaller towns, smaller places, that you do have a community that is easier to maintain.
And there's less friction. Our kids walk to elementary school. I can walk to the post office. There's a great cup of coffee, a 10-minute walk from here. I mean, the library is easy to use. I don't have to worry about parking anywhere in this town. I mean, there are things to recommend it.
Yeah. No,
We lack Korean restaurants, we lack Vietnamese restaurants.
There's certain things that you're not going to have, but everything's got a price. So
tell me about it.
You're a little bit older than I am, but not much. I'm 72. I think you're
77.
Yeah. And you look great, by the way.
Hey, man, live forever.
I had a guy asking me, an Uber driver who was a lot younger than me yesterday, and he was asking me about how I see retirement and, is it like you expected? And, he was asking me like really good, deep things because he was trying to figure out how he wants to aim the trajectory of his own thing. And it sort of forced me to think about stuff that I, was sort of not really heavily thinking about. But I do try to stay mindful about my decisions, and some of it is based on age.
Sounds like you've got a book inside you, Bob.
Oh, well, I might. I have a podcast. I don't know.
That's the modern equivalent, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose it is. I get to talk to really interesting people that stimulate all these conversations. Well, I was talking about end of life with a friend of mine who's in his 80s, and he's got a lot of physical problems. And we were just talking about some of those decisions that, he's having to make fairly soon, because he's, he doesn't know. He's doing okay today, but and I wasn't scared of it, which made me happy. There's more options now, I think, for people to.
That's very true. That's very true.
And it's, there's certain things I know that that will be unacceptable to endure, which is severe suffering and pain. I don't want that.
Sure.
Who does?
But there is this primordial fear of death inside us.
Absolutely.
And, until Charles Darwin, traditional religion mollified that fear, leavened that fear. And I think the society we're in now is searching for wellness gurus and longevity experts and various shamans who are trying to treat that fear, trying to fill that hole. I bet you've interviewed a few.
Yeah. And I always ask them, like, well, what's the point of this? I don't think I'd want to live forever. It just doesn't interest me that much. It just seems like it's not going to be, it's just going to be more of the same. And at some point it's chewed gum.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
It's a great thing to think about because it is where we all land. And it really, when you think about that, it sort of, and I wonder about some of the people that are striving to be leaders, political leaders, and power hungry people. It's like the terror of their own death must be so debilitating that they have to, go into that to try to get some sort of a longevity or a permanence. And some, and you said this earlier, some problems don't have solutions. And if you look at death as a problem, there is no solution. It's going to happen.
The human condition, Bob.
Yeah. Is it a condition or is it a failed experiment?
Good question.
Depends on what's going on and what day you talk to me. That my opinion will shift.
Well, I hope folks get some value from my little book. And
of course, it's everywhere that you can buy books. I know that. Is there a website that you maintain?
There is, yes.
Okay, let's talk about that.
Very complex. It's called CraigYorke.com.
That is complex.
Yorke with an E, YORKE.com.
Yep.
And, getting the book out into the world has been a real journey. I've met interesting folks like you. It was a success the moment it reached our kids' hands. But we'll see what the marketplace has to say.
Here's something that Walt Whitman said about this. He said, the public is a thick-skinned beast whose hide needs to be constantly beaten to remind them that you're there.
I don't know about that constantly stuff. The Buddhists say that everything that starts ends. Everything. That includes us and includes the promotional campaign for this book. I will say that there's life and death in this book. There's a torrid love story from Haight-Ashbury. There's a do-it-yourself lobotomy in this book. Do-it-yourself.
What does that mean?
A do-it-yourself frontal lobotomy. Yeah, I tell you, Well, do you have time for the story?
Yeah, I want to hear this because I've never heard this expression before.
Yeah, well, I'm the chief resident at San Francisco General, which is the designated trauma hospital for San Francisco County. And it's probably 1977. And I thought I knew what I was doing. I'm pretty good. Have this hubris, and the EMTs, I'm called to the ER, and the EMTs say, we're not going to bring this patient into the ER until you see him in the ambulance. I thought, how crazy is this? I've seen everything. Go out to the ambulance, and there's this young flower child, for your listeners, who is lying in the ambulance talking to the EMTs, and he has a spear that enters his face underneath his eye and exits at the top of his head.
Oh my gosh.
And he can't see out of his right eye, but he's got this spear, And the history is that this guy was talking to God in a phone booth in the mission, and he was carrying a spear gun around San Francisco for self-defense. And God told him to shoot himself with the spear. So he triggered it with his foot. And anyway, I had no clue what to do. Trust me, the neurosurgical literature includes nothing about spear gun injuries. Anyway, so one of the EMTs kind of, I said, he said, well, we've got a bolt cutter here. I think it would be good to cut this spear off because the bottom of it is down by his belly button. I think it would be a good idea to cut this spear off before we move him out of the ambulance and up to the OR. I said, great, please, let's do that. So we began the craniotomy with the bolt cutter in the ambulance, got the guy up to the OR, and at that point it was a relatively straightforward right frontal craniotomy. You get the mid part of the spear out. You take out the right frontal lobe because it's destroyed by the injury. Ophthalmology took his eyeball out because that was destroyed too. Anyway, post-op, he's doing great. He is walking the halls and seemed brilliant. About post-op day 5, a guy shows up in a nice suit to talk to him. And it turns out he's the guy's psychiatrist. He talks to this fellow, and I'm talking to the psychiatrist later, and he says, I've never seen this guy so well. His anxiety, was just through the roof. But now he is dramatically better. And basically what happened was this guy lobotomized himself in that phone booth. Anyway, there's stuff like that, in the book.
That is fantastical.
It is hard. It is hard to believe. It is hard to believe.
Was he on LSD or something when he did this, or he's just?
That's a good question. I'm sure he got a tox screen, urine and blood, but I think everyone was so distracted by the, the spear coming out of his head that maybe, I don't know. He was alert. I tell you that he was alert.
That's amazing.
And conversant. He was oriented. I did a typical exam. He knew where he was. He knew, what year it was and so forth. Crazy.
He cured himself in an unconventional way.
Correct. A do-it-yourself frontal lobotomy.
Wow. I love that story. Oh, my gosh. I've never had that. Now, I'm glad we kept going there to hear that one. That's amazing.
Yeah. Neurosurgical training is eventful.
Wow. Well, best of luck on the book and
Thanks,
everything else you're doing, and CraigYorke.com, folks. And the book is Steep.
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 Many thanks for having me, Bob.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you. Have a beautiful day.
You too now.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. The website is theexplodinghuman.com. You can also listen on YouTube. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Once again, I want to thank Craig Yorke for being on the show, and you can find out more at craigyyorke.com. Thank you.